Hey everyone, and I just every once in a while want to thank Mitch Green for everything that you do, so thank you. Today's Sefer Hamitzvot, day number 54, and we are continuing to learn about the laws of chametz. Chametz is that thing, leavened bread, that you're not allowed to eat on Pesach. Yesterday we did that you're not allowed to eat chametz the day before, starting with when you're able to bring up the sacrifice. Today we're going to do 3 mitzvahs, 1 positive, 2 negative. First one is positive mitzvah 156. We're commanded to remove chametz from our possession. We have to get rid of it. What we refer to as biur chametz. The source of this mitzvah is on the pasuk, B'yom harishon teshpisu sha'ar mivatechem. On the day before Pesach, everyone agrees that Yom Harishon, when is this day? This is the day before Pesach, Erev Pesach, on the 14th of Nisan. You must remove the leaven from your homes, right? You don't have to remove it from the face of this earth. Not what Hashem wants from us, but he wants us to remove it from our possession. This is a mitzvah, a biblical mitzvah. And this is what we call biur, like we just said. And let's see if there's anything else on that mitzvah. Okay, so it's very interesting. Like in general, Judaism is not a constructive, angry, let's destroy, not constructive, destructive, let's destroy, let's break, let's cause mayhem and havoc. But once in a while, there are some things where we're radically aggressive about, and removing chametz from our midst at a time that we're not allowed to have chametz, we're radical. And we know that, mothers that are cleaning out their houses go crazy. And I think it's one of the reasons why Pesach programs became so big, besides for the fact that it's a time that everyone has off so they can spend time together, but also because cleaning the house is such a big ordeal that thank God, as we became more able to get out of that situation and go away, we were running to do that. But there's this obsession and this radicalness of erasing, getting rid of, destroying chametz. And these are one of the few times in Judaism that we have that approach towards something. When something is evil and it has to be erased, like removed from planet Earth as if it doesn't exist. And of course, there's so much teachings about what is chametz. So we're doing all these things to get rid of chametz, make sure there's none of it left. We have to understand what that is. But today's conversation is more of a mitzvah halachic one, but something to think about. Okay. We make a bracha, right, when we do it. It's a very tangible mitzvah. Some say that you just need to say, it's not mine. But what we practically do is we actually burn whatever chametz is in our possession, whatever we haven't gotten rid of yet or sold to a non-Jew, etc. Next mitzvah is negative mitzvah 197, and this is the mitzvah that we're forbidden to eat, to actually eat chametz on Pesach, specifically on Pesach. And the source of this mitzvah is lo yochal chametz, and no chametz shall be eaten. If chametz was eaten intentionally, you knew exactly what you were doing, the punishment is kares. Kares is a big deal. It means to be cut off. There's a few mitzvahs that come into that category, and they're basically big deals, right? We're talking about eating on Yom Kippur. We're talking about not having a bris milah. We're talking about a man sleeping with a woman who's a nida. This is connection to the mitzvah of mikvah. It's a very, very big deal when the Torah says that a person gets kares. So when does somebody get kares? When they eat chametz intentionally, but also it also has to be a certain amount, okay? So if there's other forms of eating chametz, and we'll discuss a few in a second, there's still biblical prohibitions. So if you're not allowed to do it, you're not allowed to do it. And the approach that a Jew has, I'm not allowed to do something, I don't do it, because this is me going against God's will, etc. But sometimes we emphasize the severity of something by telling us that the punishment for it is severe. So eating chametz in like kind of the clearest, biggest way, which is eating a certain amount knowingly, that gets kares. But other things like, let's see, okay, smaller amounts, obviously, which is very little, just an ounce is considered the right amount. If you drink chametz, this is brought up, and we're not talking about beer in this instance, that comes next. We're talking about actual chametz, like just straight up chametzy items. But I think a thing that they do or did is you can like moisturize the actual chametz, so that's what it's referring to. So things like that are a problem too, again, but you don't get kares. Let's take us to the next mitzvah, which is negative mitzvah 198. this is that we're forbidden from eating anything with chametz mixed into it, even if it's not bread. The mitzvah, the source of this is kol machmetzes lo sochelu. Do not eat anything leavened. In other words, something that has chametz as part of it. The example that Rambam brings is something called kutach bavli. I think it's some kind of shmear or spread that had bits of chametz in it. Then we have Median beer, like from Madai beer, actual beer, as we know what it's made out of, and Roman vinegar. So these are examples of things that are not chametz. It's not a piece of bread. It's not a cracker. It's not a bagel. It's not, pretzels, but it has chametz in it. And we know that as Jews, to this day, on Pesach, we don't eat anything that even has a morsel of chametz in it. Okay, so in this case, it's prohibited, like we said before, but it's not kares. Kares is only in the extent when it's full on chametz item, eaten intentionally at least an ounce. Of course, it's still prohibited. And even though it's prohibited and we're warned, etc., in other words, this is something you're told not to do, but somebody won't get lashes, which is kind of like the less severe punishment, unless there's a certain amount. In other words, it's interesting that with chametz, it's all prohibited, all these different details and aspects, but there are different levels of punishments. So I want to talk about that a little bit because, when in general, our approach to mitzvos is that we do everything. It's a way to connect to Hashem. We try not to do certain things that will sever our connection to Hashem. And in many ways, we don't compare this. We don't know what's greater, what's smaller. A small thing can actually be a big thing, etc. And specifically when it comes to positive mitzvahs, because there's no idea of you have no idea what the reward is, right? It doesn't say in the Torah if you do, there's very few that it does, but if you do this, you get this reward. So we really cannot say what's greater and what's worse. What's interesting is when it comes to negative commandments, it does say most of the time what punishment you will get if you desecrate this, right? Like we're discussing here, kares, which is being cut off, or lashes. And we have to make it very clear. We're not saying it's more allowed because you don't get as big of a punishment. If it's not allowed, it's not allowed. God says don't do it, don't do it. But the severity of the punishment is there really to teach us something very specific. And there are things that are kind of like what I like to say non-negotiables. You don't go there, right? We know that a Jew can know very little about Judaism, to no fault of their own. God puts everyone in the upbringing they're supposed to have. But like almost everyone knows, you don't fast, you don't eat on Yom Kippur. There's some things that baby boy gets a bris. I know someone who, you know a lot of people, they marry a non-Jew, they think they don't care about anything. And then as soon as their kid is born, it's like, well, of course they're getting a bris, That's why mikvah, it's one of the reasons why mikvah is such a high up there mitzvah that we adhere to, because the mitzvah of the warning of not sleeping with a woman who's a nida, in other words, somebody who had their period and didn't go through the days of counting and immersing in the mikvah, is kares level. It's bad. We don't do that. So it's important to learn about the things that are on this level, because again, everything is about connecting to Hashem. I guess the way I'd put it is, it's like best way of understanding relationship to Hashem is like understanding the relationship between husband and wife. And we're all going to make mistakes with our spouses. And it's never good. It's never good to insult them. It's never good to make them feel little. It's never good to hurt them, physically, emotionally, etc. But some things are just non-negotiables. They're deal breakers, right? I don't think I have to spell out what those are. So I think that's a good way of understanding the difference. Again, it's all forbidden. If Hashem says this is something we don't do it. But it's whenever Hashem says kares, or a very strong level of punishment, it's not about putting the fear of God in us. It's about understanding the gravity of it. So tomorrow we're going to continue a little bit more about chametz. And again, it's fascinating, right? We discussed the laws of working on Shabbos. It's one biblical commandment. And here the chametz, look how many biblical commandments there are just on chametz. Again, just to show you kind of what a big deal it is. I always wish it was Pesach right now so we could actually delve into it. But in very short, chametz is all about the ego and thinking that it's about you. And we need to get rid of that, get rid of all the stuff that takes away from who we really are. And yeah, before bringing back home, it's a different time. So thank you for joining us for today's Sefer Hamitzvot. God willing, I will see you tomorrow.